All right, welcome everyone to Table Talk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer. No Glue Boy today, but I'm joined by my lovely guest here. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Steve, otherwise known as the Raffo Guy on YouTube, under at the Cosmere Knot on all of the socials. I've been making Sanderson videos for the past 7 years, so
Wow.
yeah, I've been around, guys.
And what a great time to be around, because I just got into it, to be fair. I just got into it since the beginning of this year, and it's been a
Ooh,
wild ride.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. But speaking about me entering into, the Cosmereverse, what's your experience with tabletop? I'm curious.
Okay, it's kind of weird. Most of my experience with tabletop gaming is actually from my brother. My oldest brother created from whole cloth his own system, his own world, his own everything that he has been slowly refining over the past 20 years. And so we have had sibling game nights where we all get together and just play the newest iteration of his tabletop game. And that's where most of my tabletop experience has happened, is just playing this other weird, no one actually knows about because it's only in our family tabletop game that is really, really fun.
That's super. Those are always the best games, to be honest. It's because, that the problem with tabletop in general is, for a long time it was very uniterated, because there just wasn't a lot of people making games, and they were
Mhm.
not very lucrative, and the rules have been just evolving slowly up until the 2010s, and now they've been exploding, and now there's all kinds of games coming out with all kinds of cool stuff. But
Yeah.
that's super cool. I would like to hear about that probably more when we have a lot more time, because that sounds like a whole thing.
It's really fun. The things that he has done with like the world that he's built is just really, really cool. But the way he does combat in his system is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's so intuitive and it gets the feel of actual
Ooh.
it's not turn based. You go, I go. It's very, very fluid and intuitive, and it's really, really great.
I'm really gonna have to drill you about this later at some point, because
I have been pushing him to actually publish it for a while now, and the main hang up is he needs artists, and
yeah,
artists are expensive.
yeah, because I'm in the process of developing my own system at this point in time, and I have my own
Mhm.
games. I was recently live playing, testing it recently, and it's been super good. But I'm always willing to steal more stuff from other people to make it even better. But that's super cool. So you don't have a lot of experience then with many of the main franchises in the TTRPG space.
I've done D&D several times. I've DM'd D&D several times.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't touched Pathfinder at all, and I now have experience with Cosmere. So
That's fair. Yeah. Have you been looking into the Cosmere RPG at all?
there's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, besides the
I
lore stuff, which is how the game works.
Right. I've been mostly focused on lore. That's my
Yeah, of course.
main obsession. So I've been digging through the world guide and have been shocked at the amount of minutia that we're getting about
Yeah.
all these other different cultures and stuff. It's really cool.
It's crazy to see Roshar brought to life in the most detail we've ever seen
Mhm.
in I mean, I guess it makes sense, but in a TTRPG. And to be fair, when I was watching Brandon Sanderson talk about, some of the development stuff, and I've watched some of his intentionally blank episodes
Uh-huh.
where he mentions it, he's definitely my kind of gamer, for sure. Just he loves the rules, he likes the crunch, but he also likes the story. He wants to tell a story
Min
with it.
maxing and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, it's so different with the Cosmere RPG, because some of the Radiants are just kind of busted. Like, I just did Else Caller the other day. I did a video on it, and like Soulcast Parry is just if you succeed, their weapon is gone. They just don't have a weapon anymore unless it's a shard blade or something like
Right.
that. Which is scary, really. Just being able to just, like, games have tried for years to make disarming balanced somehow, because losing your weapon is very bad. And then here's Else Caller and probably Lightweaver just gone. Your weapon's gone. It's a wild time, and that's not even to talk about Windrunners just touching an enemy and sending them out of the battlefield, banishing them away to inevitably fall to their death, probably.
That's one of the really, really awesome things about everything that is happening with the Cosmere RPG. The fact that you can do such crazy stuff, but it's deeply grounded in what we've already seen other people do in the books themselves.
Yes.
Like, it's so cool to just see, like, we maybe not have seen someone specifically poof someone's sword that they're being attacked with into smoke, but like, that's very clearly the next step of what you would be able to do with the abilities that we've seen in book. It's so cool.
It's really interesting. And not only that, but, like, obviously, like, the game is made to, like, reflect the books in the best way. So you're going to see a lot of those influences, but they also just feel good. And also just the fact that we now know more about the surges that we didn't get to see really anything about and what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
In weird ways, sometimes I'm like a little like, to be fair, like, they tried their best to keep the game relatively sensible, which makes some of the stuff not feel like Windrunners don't feel like how Windrunners are written in the books. You put your surge on yourself or your friend and they get a fly speed. That's definitely not how it's represented in the books whatsoever. Granted, for the style game they wanted to go for, and I think just in general, it would be kind of a nuisance to, like, have to micromanage how many, like, lashings you give someone. It's like quarter lashing this, half lashing that, you know,
in specific directions, and that would get really tough to manage. Just the amount of things you can do, like, on a minute scale, would be overwhelming to run, not just as a player, but, like, as a GM. Just needing to keep track of all of these things for your play group, but also all of the NPCs that you're running and, like, everything that is going on in the game. Simplifying is essential to that type of thing.
My one gripe is the Windrunners and Skybreakers. The Gravity Surge has lashing shot, I think is what it's called, where they can take an object and, you know, hit it with multiple lashings, and it flies and it hits someone really, really hard. But the thing I don't like about it is you're not incentivized to put it on bigger objects, because essentially the amount of, like, surges and ranks you put into it just determines the damage, not the size of the object that you put it into.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So a sphere does essentially the same damage as, like, a huge statue if it falls into someone, if you put enough investiture into it, and it's the same amount of investiture either way.
Okay, no, I can argue that, actually.
Sure. I'm open to the argument.
So a larger object is going to require more investiture to move, generally. Which means with the same amount of investiture, you would be able to get a sphere going at incredibly high speeds, whereas you'd be able to get a big old statue to go and just shuffle through the battlefield. So in terms of actual, like, damage output, if we're talking force equals mass times acceleration, the amount of acceleration you'll be able to get on a smaller mass is going to have a larger force.
Yes, but I'll counter argue. only so far as the area which it covers. So it's equivalently the same as being shot by a bullet or an arrow, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, it hurts. It could potentially be lethal, or being crushed your entire body by a weight, I would say would, in theory, do way more damage. So
That's fair.
it's and to be fair, right, my argument is, because I'm a very, like, I've been doing tabletop for ages and ages, and I've dedicated my life to the hobby. I want my players to think ingenuitively, use the environment, and be incentivized to try to use that in combat, because it's just more cinematic, it's more interesting. But something like this mechanic intuitively makes players lazier, because now they can just take a dun sphere, a pebble, and do effectively the same amount of damage. So that's my gripe. But otherwise, I'm having a lot of fun in general with the system, and the surges are insane, and getting the ideals for the different orders and seeing their combo abilities. Like, who could have guessed Elsecaller's combo ability of transportation and transformation is good eyes. Really good eyes, essentially.
Those resonances, yeah.
Well, because my co-host said that's not a resonance, is a different thing.
Okay.
Because he was doing some research on it, and resonance are, I guess, a completely different thing. He's in the chat right now. He said earlier, by the way, I'll give him a shout out. He says, "Woo, would love to be there if I could. Big fan of the channel, Cosmere. Got into the Cosmere reading your Rafa order, and been shamelessly shilling it. Lemao banger list."
I'm proud of that order. I need to do another one, because we've gotten more books since the Rafu, but it's a good one.
Yeah, he says that the book doesn't have the resonances, because I guess resonances, like, Lightweavers are supposed to have, like, really good memory or something like that, but that's not in the book. That's not what they get. Instead, in the book, Lightweavers get like hard light constructs, essentially. Like, they have the ability to make physical illusions, you know, unlike Truth Watchers, who I don't even know what their ability is at the moment, because I haven't done the video yet, but it's interesting. I do like how they did not pull their punches. You know, people are saying, oh, well, a Windrunner would never send someone to fly into the sky to a very horrifying death. I'm like, okay, fine. Skybreaker, then, if you will. You know, I don't care how you're doing it. Someone's going to do it. And we've seen in the series as well that Spren are a lot looser than we may have first thought when it came to, like, how some of these powers or ideals are given out and everything like that. And so there can be argued that there's really no morals that are necessary, just how much you can synergize with the Spren, who, of course, are afraid of humans for good reasons, and forming those Nihil bonds, but still.
It makes me wonder how likely we are to see someone with 2 bonded Radiant Spren. Like, the fact that we've seen how malleable the... I don't want to necessarily say morality, but the value, the ideals,
ideals of the
different Spren are. Like, how difficult would it be to convince 2 separate Radiant Spren to bond?
Yeah, and that's one of the weirder things, because it was very prominent early when it came to Selfrena, who, you know, when Kaladin was starting to kind of, like, go against his ideals a little bit, and she started getting weaker and weaker and kind of putting stress on that bond. And we've even saw that with someone like the Stormfather, who went under similar things with Dalinar. But then we have Spren like the Cryptics that can they just want your secrets. And so, like, the more you lie to yourself, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. So it's like, it feels it would be difficult to put any kind of stress on a bond with like a cryptic, because like you're either lying to yourself more and not being truthful with yourself, which they're just like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, or you're telling the truth and they're like, that's the bond, that's the thing.
That would be interesting to explore, though. Like, at what level does a cryptic get... Like, at what level of self-deception does a cryptic start to detach?
Or if you become suddenly, like, just completely open and free and open with everyone in perpetuity, like, you don't have those secrets anymore. Like, are they more finicky than we think? Because if you do get full, like, resolution with yourself, that will weaken your bond because you're no longer needing to lie to yourself. It's very interesting.
Though the way you progress as a Lightweaver is telling truths. So...
But there can't be no truths without lies.
That's very true.
So, if you don't lie anymore, if you're completely open... I don't know. It's so interesting to think about.
Now I'm just wondering, like, what would the most overpowered pairing of Radiant orders be? If you could... You obviously don't want to be two orders that share a surge, unless you get that surge amplified somehow.
Well, so you actually... Kind of, yeah. I mean, because... The most powerful surge, in my opinion, is probably Dustbringer, just because Abrasion plus Division Abrasion gives them so many defensive qualities and speed and stuff like that. Like, people will say Skybreaker because flight is like the ultimate form of mobility, but like Skybreakers can't just like brush off a blow because you've reduced the friction on yourself so much. So if you gave Dustbringer like the progression surge and they can just heal themselves, then they just become nearly untouchable, because you can't lay your hands on them enough to actually do enough damage that they can't heal back, and they have division, so you can just be atomized. So, I mean... It's very interesting, and I don't know. In the book, unfortunately, does not do a lot to answer this question at all, which is...
We met one Dustbringer.
Well, there's that. Well, two. There's one in Stonewall.
Okay, yeah. Oh, is there?
Yeah. Of the second ideal.
Maybe I do need to dive into it. All right.
Which isn't really much of a spoiler because I don't think they're super plot relevant. They're just kind of like a cool character who shows up. But it's interesting because there's so many implications, and Brandon has gone on to talk about how surges are just really, really strong. And the game, of course, takes place somewhere between the second and the third book, technically, at least like in general, maybe a little bit past the third depending on some of your perceptions, but not quite into the fourth book or fifth book and beyond. And fifth book and beyond is a conversation I want to have a little bit later, so I'll give some spoilers later. We will talk about Wind and Truth and what happens at the end of that book. Yeah, it's pretty nutty, but it's really interesting. And having multiple Spren doesn't feel like that terrible of a thing, especially because in Wind and Truth, a little bit of a spoiler, I mean, Kaladin is essentially dealing with multiple Spren at the same time, and they're kind of just like vibing with him a bit. Not with like his bonds specifically, but like talking with, I don't remember their name because it's just numbers.
You can call them Ox. That works.
Yeah. or even like, it's something where it's shown that you can kind of have some decent relationship with multiple spren at a time.
1 2 1 2 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll trust you. I'm not gonna look it up.
1 2 1 2 4.
Which that's not even that much of a spoiler because no one's gonna know who we're even talking about to that point. I don't know. Because like the idea when they were talking about made it seem like the ideals might clash, but like being a Windrunner and a Stoneward, there's no real clashes because being a Windrunner is just, swearing to protect people, and then being a Stoneward is just standing up and being stalwart and being, being
it's
there.
like being where you're needed, right?
Yeah. So
what if you're being where you're needed in order to protect those that can't protect themselves? Like,
yeah. So it feels like it just has to be a thing between the Spren, like their individual ideologies, and and also I will say mechanically in the game, there's not a huge benefit to running multiple Radiant paths because you're so limited on how many overall talents your character gets access to that if you choose to spread yourself out over 4 surges and 2 Spren bonds, don't forget we have to speak the higher ideals for some of the abilities anyway, and to gain better access to the powers. Like, you're gonna just spend a lot of your talents just doing cool power stuff when a lot of the other Radiants will just be much better with their powers, which are already kind of broken, and then people who take the heroic paths actually can do things other than surges. So
it's the whole argument of specificity versus generalization. Like, how deep do you want to be able to get on one specific thing and get really good at that versus being able to do a whole bunch of things but not nearly as good as someone who specifies would be able to.
Yeah, well, and like I think even more importantly than that, many of the Radiant Orders get a talent that allows them to essentially benefit from being I want to say infected, but that seems like the wrong term to use. Having their surge placed upon them. Well, that's the thing. Just by being invested, you will now be under the effects of one of your surges. So normally, like for instance, if you have abrasion, you need to use an action or 2 actions to give yourself abrasion, so that now you do all the slippy cool slide stuff. But they get a talent later where just by having Stormlight in your body, boom, now you have that benefit, which is huge action economy on your first round, and even more action economy when you think that you don't have to breathe as soon because you're not expending the investiture to use the ability, so just to sustain it. So and I don't think you need it to sustain because it just says you're under the effects of it, so you just become way more investiture like efficient essentially. And that's usually at the bottom of the lists, which is minimum 5 and probably more talents down the tree. So that's a quarter of your levels if we're just talking base. Granted, this does have an uncapped level system, but like if you're getting to 20 plus, you're not going to probably be dealing with stuff on Roshar anymore. Like,
or if you do, it's going to be toe-to-toe with a Thunderclass. Like, there's...
Right.
The cool thing, though, about that, like, again, that reflects what we've seen in the book when people are going through and reaching those higher ideals. Like, fledgling Windrunners don't just go around floating all the time.
Yeah.
But when you get to the point where, like, Kaladin is in Oathbringer or Rhythm of War, he is just naturally more comfortable not on the ground.
He's just floating in his living room.
Yeah.
during the beginning of Wind and Truth. He's just sitting there.
Exactly.
Floating around like a bubble on a breeze just because, well, 1, tower light, but 2, also because, like, it's just so natural to him at that point that, like, he can essentially make those minor adjustments with lashings as like secondhand nature. And a feature that I see no one talking about as well, you can command your Spren to do things like scout for you and do all kinds of interesting things with actions in the game that have like some mechanical benefits. So it's really cool. It's very, very interesting. And then they've, I'm sure you probably haven't seen new Fabriels in the book. We got a Cremriel that produces creme. So
it produces creme or attracts?
I believe it produces creme. I'll have to double check.
Huh.
What does the Cremriel do? Because I mentioned this last time, but you know what? I didn't do my due diligence and double check my info. But there is an item called a Cremriel.
Producing creme makes me really wonder what the like realmatic makeup of creme is if a Fabriel is able to produce it. Because typically Brandon tries to follow the laws of thermodynamics pretty well.
Oh, okay.
And
so here's what it is. So Fabriel allows stone to become as soft as creme, is what it does. Okay. It turns into a soft like clay. All right. And the name was a little misleading, but
okay, so it's a will shaper Fabriel.
Yeah. And we're going to see Fabriels for pretty much every surge, which is terrifying because that means we might have some division Fabriels out there. So, you know, the game opens up so much interesting play space for even just Cosmere heads, because now, you know, now we have to think about the implications of Fabriel sciences in general. Like before, yeah, sure, we understood roughly that Fabriels could kind of mimic surges to some degree, but now that some of them have been really shown to be like very much surge based.
Yeah.
And so, you know, talking about Retribution's war, I think Fabriel sciences are going to be way more interesting.
I mean, spoilers for, you know, End of Wind and Truth, but Fabriels are going to get, I think, increasingly funkier because Stormlight is going to be in less and less supply. And so they're going to have to, like, shift and alter how Fabriel works, which is... It's going to be weird.
Yeah.
Like,
so, you know,
working off the different light is...
Yeah, let's do a big spoiler warning right now. If you haven't finished Wind and Truth, I don't know when we'll ever not stop talking about it. So you might want to come back to the stream later. I don't know. So yeah,
do your homework and then come back.
Yeah. End of Wind and Truth. Wait a few moments. Make sure everyone who shouldn't be here is gone. End of Wind and Truth. Stormlight's effectively gone. No more Stormlight.
Yep.
Which, by the way, I mentioned it to the light callers, and I'll mention it now. I did not like how Wind and Truth ended, because my favorite part of the setting of Roshar was like the overall ecology of Roshar, and like how the storm played into the planet's overall, like how it functions, how it works. That just doesn't exist anymore. So, unless Retribution makes a new high storm like effect, like Krem won't even be falling anymore.
Yeah.
Which is
a major part of the ecology.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate. And you know, with essentially Retribution being in control of most of the investiture on the planet at this point. Yeah. We were talking about it before, and we came to the consensus that we'll get like rather than Stormlight, Void Lights, not expansion but new setting book for that when it comes down the line after we do Mistborn and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get essentially a new TTRPG at that point when we have the Unoathed and yeah, which
I love them so much.
Oh really? All right, let me know. Like, what about them?
I mean, just the fact Adelyn was 100% my favorite character in Wind and Truth. Like, I loved every single second with Adelyn. And getting, like, him reaching a place where it feels like he should be is so satisfying to me. It feels like Adelyn... My main concern with Adelyn was, of course, I was, like, pushing for him to swear an oath and become a Radiant. Right. Like, in Oathbringer, when he's running through Thalen City, I was like, oh, he's 100% being an edge dancer right now. But the fact that he didn't become a Radiant, but is his own thing, is, like, it's sort of analogous to, like, Sokka in Avatar: Last Airbender.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Sokka becoming a bender would have been a disservice to his character.
Right.
But instead, Sokka becomes his own very important type of person. And the fact that we got that with Adelyn, where he isn't joining the ranks of everyone else that he's been comparing himself to for 4 books.
Yeah.
But becomes his own very unique type of character in his own right is so satisfying to me.
Yeah. I would argue that he has equivalent, like, war feats that Kaladin does in, like, all the books. Because, like, Adelyn has been a big part of many of the most important fights in all the books. And, yeah, sure, Kaladin has fought some really powerful people and done some kind of cool things. But, like, Adelyn's made some very, like, impactful moves in some of the most important battles in all of the books. So, like, feat for feat, I feel like they're pretty even. Also, hey, Docsun here in the chat. He was the GM for our game when we ran it. So, thanks for stopping by. Do you not think that Retribution could create Stormlight? Didn't Brandon say Harmony could create both God Metals? I mean, yeah, but why would he?
Yeah.
He has complete control over Voidlight, essentially, so, you know. It behooves him not to make Stormlight, and only if the people beg and give themselves to Retribution, which, you know, would be a kind of a bad thing for them, usually. And he even goes on to say, towards the end of the book, that if they want it, they'll have to ask me for it now, and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, he's supplying Warlight to those who specifically request it, but it has to come from, like, it's not just continually replenished like with the High Storm. It has to be, hey, Terravanja Daddy, can we get some light?
Yeah. It's kind of a, I don't know, it's really hard to think of how things are going to work after book 5, because most of the most important things that need to work no longer are going to work unless they're in close proximity to the tower.
Right.
So, you know.
And who knows how long that's going to work, because
because we don't know.
There's a big old question mark there.
Yeah. Granted, I know people have been talking about Lift, how Lift does not need light in the standard way to create essentially her needed investiture. And we have another entity that can create a bondsmith currently. So
no one's gotten the Night Watcher yet.
So, you know, like, we have a potential way that Brandon is not going to make easy nor, like, without costs to get light. So it's going to be fascinating, but we're gonna have to wait 7 years for those books to come out.
Though bonding with the Night Watcher presumably would give that bondsmith access to Lifelight and not Stormlight, which that's the same. Yeah, that's what Lift is running on, is Lifelight. So the still like Stormlight is going to be increasingly harder to get.
Yeah.
It really ruins the Ghostbloods plans. Really.
Yeah. Which, I mean, boo-hoo. But
hey, free investiture, but now, nope.
Yeah. Which, you know, just gives Retribution more enemies, which is not a bad thing. So, you know, I
just can't make friends.
So I'm gonna ask you some questions I asked the light callers last week. What world / system are you the most interested to see in tabletop form?
I have always been an absolute lover of Scadriel.
Yeah.
And the way
yep.
I love Mistborn. I love Allomancy. I think that is going to function really, really well in a tabletop form.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also excited for it because guns, and I'm also like, I don't know if it makes me like an apostate amongst tabletop players, but like to be fair, I am working on a high fantasy setting game myself, in addition to a modern setting, because I want more modern setting TTRPGs. There's not enough of them. Give me high fantasy modern settings. I want to do some anime shit. I want to do something where, you know, I'm like Dante from Devil May Cry, using swords and guns and demon weapons while riding a motorcycle. Like, give me more of that in games, please. Not that we're necessarily going to get that crazy on Scadriel, but I mean, we already know one of the heroic paths is called Gunner, so if you want to use guns, there's a whole path for it, and then just the different ways of the Feruchemy and the... I haven't read the book, so I'm a little fuzzy around this one. Feruchemy and...
Hemalurgy?
Hemalurgy, there it is, yeah. Can be stacked together in that setting for really cool things.
I mean, Feruchemy is written for a TTRPG. Like, that is storing traits, and like, you're just manipulating stat blocks. Like, that's all it is. But it's really, like, it's gonna work so well.
And Andrew, we have played a good amount of Fabula Ultima as well, which is okay. It's a good game, but it's very lighter than I like personally. There's just not a lot of mechanics. They don't even have skills in that game. You just roll 2 stats together and hope it works. So it's very, very difficult to get the same kind of experience. But I do like Fabula Ultima. I think it's a good game. I love the class system, because the class system necessitates like multi-classing at the base. You have to start with 2 classes minimum. So you do a bunch of class mixing, and you can mix 5 classes to max, but you can have more classes if you don't want to get any of them maxed, to make a truly unique character with your own capabilities that you want them to have, which is really cool. It's very interesting. But yeah, Mistborn is going to be awesome, because from everything I've seen, I haven't even read the books yet, and I'm already hyped for it. It's very interesting. I'm trying to get through Elantris right now, which the first book is a little rough, to be fair.
It is.
Not that the world isn't interesting, but I just don't find the pacing good, I think, is probably my argument.
And that's fair. That's why in my reading order, I usually say, if you know you're going to want to read the entire Cosmere, start with Elantris. Because that sets the baseline for writing style, and then it only gets better from there.
Yeah. And you know what? This is a great time to ask that question. So, your Raffo order. Tell me about it. Tell me like the rhyme, the reason, what makes Raffo. Or Rafu, I suppose.
The Rafu, the read and fight out order. I've wanted to be able to recommend a specific reading order to people for a long time. That's why I originally came up with what I settled on as the acronym of the Decroiwa Trafo Tanket Miswa, which is the definitive Cosmere reading order if you want to read and find out all the things and notice connections in the most satisfying way.
Ah, I see.
Yes. You know, the Decroiwa Trafo Tanket Miswa. But as we got more and more books that needed to be adjusted, specifically with all of the connections that were starting to form between the different series. My original idea for my reading order was just going basically from planet to planet and getting this story, finishing up that society and those people, and then moving on to a different planet and getting that entire thing. But with my read and find out order, that of necessity had to change, because by the time we're getting to the end of Mistborn Era 2, there are connections everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're not missing out if you don't notice them, but
it's funner when you do notice them.
It's way more fun when you can point to a thing and be like, oh, that's talking about this in this other book over here. That's really cool. So that's why eventually with my second reading order, I sort of transitioned away from going system by system and went not quite chronological, but more following as we get more and more reveals in text, jumping between stories to be able to recognize those reveals.
Yeah. And I imagine that Wind and Truth must have really been a wild one to throw in there.
I made my latest I made the read and find out order before Wind and Truth came out.
Right.
And just like, well, this is where it probably will go. I need to make another reading order in order to to account for everything that happens in Wind and Truth, all of the secret projects that are like, we know more about them now than we did when I first made that reading order, with Isles of the Emberdark. Like, there's so much that needs to be considered when figuring out a definitive reading order, and it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, but see, that's what made you. That's what people wanted, is someone to do the work. You know?
All right, I'll buckle down.
To be
I'm already working on an updated timeline video of my updated timeline video because we've gotten a lot more info about the whole timeline of the Cosmere, so that's going to be a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't envy you, but to be fair, I do something similar because I've been covering Cosmere as it came out for all because I want to make videos that people are going to watch who are wanting to get into the game, and so I talk about each of like the Radiant paths and the Heroic paths, be like, the player facing options, the thing that people who might not know about the game but what they can get out of it when they invest in stuff like that. And then I have been doing it for Pathfinder 2nd Edition because they also came out with a new book, and then Starfinder 2nd Edition because, of course they had to release at the same time. And then, I'll have other tabletop games because, like, tabletop's in such a fascinating spot right now where D&D has effectively died, or at least it's, like, it's terminally ill. And it's
no longer top dog, that's for sure.
Well, it kind of is, but like it's quickly not being the case. Critical Role's Daggerheart came out and has been essentially hoovering up everyone who's kind of fallen off of D&D, which has been fascinating. And it's more shocking that they don't do anything with D&D, even though there's so many people who were so invested in it, and they tried to earn money out of it in the worst ways possible when all they had to do was just make more good stuff and people would have just gotten it. Never mind. It's not hate D&D streaming, even though most of them are. I want people who enjoy D&D to have a good game. That's my opinion. But, and so we have Daggerheart, who's bringing up a lot of people, but now that people are feeling transitioning to systems, especially because Daggerheart isn't a D20 system. It's a 2D12 system, technically. we have now Cosmere, which is a D20 system that's very similar to D&D in a lot of ways. And, you know, I feel like the attention of the Cosmere heads on this content, because there's a lot of people who are not interested in the game, but are interested in what the game has, is going to generate traffic that will inevitably bring people who want to play a new game, who are being like, oh, this is similar to what I played before. Let's try this one out. And then they're going to be like, oh my God, I'm a god. I can just send people off into space by touching them. What the heck? I couldn't do that in D&D. That seems broken. So, you know, and then they face off against a shard bearer, and then things get a lot scarier. But still, like, it's interesting. And I like what the Cosmere has done. I feel like the more I've done the Cosmere RPG, though, the more it kind of slips away from potentially becoming my new favorite TTRPG. It does some things I really like very well. I like how it gives more I like how it actually has some kind of narrative combat where you can talking to someone. There's actually mechanics for how that works, and there's some paths that are more orientated towards that than others, which is interesting. I would like to play a game where I could make a Politico-style character and feel very, like, impactful, rather than, I'm good at this skill check, but so is the rogue, because the rogue is a rogue, you know? I like how you can have, like, patrons, and I like how there's certain mechanical things in the game you can get only through accomplishing goals, essentially, which is cool. I don't like how the goal system is set up, though, because it feels more like a rough guideline on how to get there than like a mechanical thing to actually interact with, because I don't know how much you've looked into the goals, but your character sets a goal, like, I want shard plate, and the idea is that you get 3 little pips to work towards that goal, and the idea is you're supposed to work towards one of those pips, hopefully at the very least once per session.
Yeah.
But obviously a character can't get shard plate 3 sessions into their game, and they talk about this in the book. They're like, all right, so your character might reevaluate, you like what to do, blah blah blah. There's all this kind of vague narrative stuff. The goal system is more of just a rough way of guiding players into trying to tell a story to get a thing without any hard mechanics or rules to kind of like actually hold on to, which feels a little messy in my experience.
You want it crunchier.
Yes, but I would like something that also just feels tangible, you know, rather than just a half system that forces a lot more work on the GM because of the kind of odd ways that it works.
Fair.
So that's my thing. And like, of course, in tabletop, no one ever agrees on anything, and there's going to be people who are going to disagree on the very idea of it. But like, I've played games with good kind of systems. I'm developing a game that has a much better kind of goal system that is a lot more tangible and gives you more. It's more just based on like, did you do a thing narratively for the narrative, for the end game, like, rather than trying to fabricate a thing. It's just like, did you actually do a thing that helps the story along? Yes, here's a point towards that goal. You get enough points, you get the thing you're looking for. But they're all things that are like, actually your character does a thing that is narratively impactful, that gives you the point, rather than how goals are set up where it's just, it could be a thing your character did, or maybe a thing that just kind of happened. We started Stonewalkers, and we started Stonewalkers right after Bridge 9, because Bridge 9, you know, so some of them were bridgemen, and then their goals were obviously not to be bridgemen anymore. But in order for Stonewalkers to work, they can't be bridgemen. So when we started, I released them from being bridgemen. And so it's like,
oh, check.
Yeah, done. What do I get, GM? You're not a slave anymore. Yay.
Which is a good thing.
Yes. But again, the player it was just a thing that was going to happen because it needed to. And like, I like how they have patrons, and I like how they generally work, and I like how you can get companions, like a Rashadium, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But the guidelines to get to it just feel off. Yeah, so what Doxon is saying is the system can be very GM heavy, and it can be hard for new GMs because a lot of it is just, hey, GM, figure it out. You know, another place where this happens, nowhere in the core book do they talk really about traversing the Bead Ocean and how that works in Shademar. Yeah, it's not really in the book, in the core book at all. But we have Else Callers who get an ability called Else Calling that teleports them to Shademar, which 90% of the time when they use it, they're going to end up in the Bead Ocean.
Drop it, right.
Now, the World Guide offers some guidance on creating constructs from the Bead Ocean, but there's not a succinct guide to traversing the Bead Ocean or really making use of Else Calling in any effective way whatsoever. Oh, I don't know if you looked into it, but Else Callers have a really, really cool ability called Else Gate. Do you know what this does?
Kind of.
Kind of. It takes them and their friends to a Oath Gate or perpendicularity they've been to before from anywhere.
Whoa.
Right? They don't gotta travel there. They just go to one they've been to before.
Okay, fast traveling. Got it.
Essentially, they become their own Oath Gate, essentially. But they can also go to a perpendicularity they've been to before, which means if they can get their Stormlight to work, it will work in other worlds that have perpendicularities that they've been to before, at least. Which they would almost necessitate having to.
Uh-huh. If you've been to another world, you at this point have to go through a perpendicularity.
So
I wonder if there's going to be like distance modifiers for that.
There's not in the book. You just go there.
Like once we get to other worlds, though, I'm not sure if you can like hop from.
We'll probably get that in World Hoppers, to be fair.
Yeah,
but that I would say is not a big deal considering you could just go to the perpendicularity you got to there with, and then just technically go back. But you can only go to Oath Gates and perpendicularities. If you want to go anywhere else, you still got to kind of do it the old-fashioned way. But, like, that's still an insane power that people didn't know Else Callers could do up until this point.
Again, the lore drops we're getting. Like, and, yeah, that's... Some of that might be just massaging lore into a game mechanic, but the fact that it's possible somewhere means it might be possible in the actual world. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I really want to like the Cosmere game. It's got so many really cool things. I like some of the directions they very much have gone, but I think just due to, one, I think the overall design principles trying to be as accessible as possible has kind of inevitably gotten in the way of what the system potentially could have been. And I think as well, there's just so many things stipulated on information Brandon has not decided to share with us yet that kind of makes designing things that are going to work, you know, evergreen into the future very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So I like the game. Don't get me wrong. We're gonna go through Stonewalkers, and the group is so excited. We have a Stoneward, an Else Caller, and a Windrunner at this time, and probably another Radiant. But then we have a player who's deciding just to go full heroic path, no Radiant whatsoever, and I'm so excited to see how they do in comparison. But like, for me, what I want is a game that I can sink my teeth into inside and outside of combat, mechanically speaking, and everything runs back into the narrative to make it fun, to make it more interesting, to make things, you know, because I want mechanics to support the narrative, and I love the narrative bits, honestly, on more than the combat bits. You know, I don't like it when a system is just like, all right, do you convince the king? Roll a persuasion check against a DC, because that's so uninteresting mechanically speaking. It just, this is a potentially an interesting roll. The plot die can make that more interesting, but the plot die in itself is potentially going to cause more work, because then you get a complication. All right, GM, snap, what complication do you get?
Figure it out.
Yeah. And while they do have some basics, like lose a focus, gain a focus, all that kind of stuff like that, it's not that deep. I like how how at least in Stormlight or in Cosmere, if you're talking to someone, you can work their focus down to get them to convince to your point, and there's abilities that kind of focus on that. That's really interesting. That's very cool. But it's not a lot. It's about that deep, honestly. And I don't know. I would like more, because my current favorite game is Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is the most strategic, most interesting, like, combat exploration game that I can imagine, even though its social systems are, again, your choice of skill check or multiple skill checks. Get so many skill checks before a failure, so many failures, which is a system, I suppose, but very bare bones.
Yeah.
I want to build a character to be able to talk the pants off of people as like my whole thing, as my mechanic, as I dive into, like I want to play a game for different ways of playing the game, rather than just everything mostly melding down into a combat system, which, at the very least, Surges has so many interesting uses outside of combat. There's so many ways you can use Surges in creative and ingenuitive ways that I feel like helps greatly make Surges more interesting than like a lot of spells in some games are. Yeah. Sorry, that was my rant on just overall game systems. So what setting do you think would be, besides the one you would like to see him play in the most, like what setting do you think would be the most interesting, like TTRPG wise, to explore?
Good question. What setting, like Cosmere World or?
Cosmere World's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like with going into a TTRPG, you need elements of familiarity that you can sort of ground yourself in as a player, but you also want things that are unique and interesting and exciting that you can explore as a character. So trying to balance those two things, I would say the most interesting world to explore in the Cosmere, specifically in a TTRPG setting, would probably be, I think Threnody would be really cool. And that would be an interesting, like, you'd have to consciously avoid combat or get really, really creative with combat on Threnody.
Interesting.
Because, have you read Shadows for Silence and Forest of Hell?
Not yet.
Okay, well, I'm not going to spoil anything then, but the basic like magic system, I guess, in Shadows for Silence on Threnody is you like don't shed blood at night, don't run, and don't kindle flame. And so if you are needing to be aware of these things as you're exploring the landscape with your party, trying to avoid getting basically eaten by ghosts.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to make the actual role-playing part a lot more interesting and force you into coming up with creative solutions to literal life and death problems as your characters go through the world.
Yeah, that does sound interesting. It's so fascinating that Brandon has come up with all these interesting settings that I like. For me, I think Roshar is honestly probably a really good one, just because I love Fabriel sciences. I think Fabriel sciences are so fascinating to kind of dive into, and we do have the Fabriel crafter as or the Artifabrian path.
Yeah, as a role or path.
And the Spren, I think, are endlessly fascinating. We still don't know really a whole lot about anything about Spren, actually. So I think looking into the Spren and like how they interact with Shadesmar specifically, and the Horneater Peak sounds like such a fascinating place that we have not a lot of information on.
Still waiting on that rock novella.
Yeah. So, like, I've always been kind of like, Roshar is not a place I would like to be personally, because I love my green, I like my verdant places, I like the ocean and stuff like that. And while they do have, like, Thalena is definitely probably a lot more leaning in that direction, it's not a very verdant place. There's a lot of blasted lands, a lot of just not very super hospitable places, and you know, everything is storms and creme, and that's, you know, about it. And crab, lots of crab.
Everything is crab.
Yeah. Which, by the way, some of the new fauna we've seen in the World Guide is so fascinating. Which just, again, makes Wind and Truce so much more painful, because it's just like, how are they gonna survive?
Everything interbreeds with hordlings.
Yeah.
That's how they survive.
Oh my goodness. Also, I don't know when it will show up, but do you think we're going to see a return of the Blackthorn in later books?
Yes, and it terrifies me.
I'm so hyped, because imagine, is he just going to be was it Yelignar?
No, I don't think it's...
Well, I mean, in the way that he's just going to be given, like, why is he not just going to be given all the surges?
I feel like there would be hoops to jump through in order to do that, even with a cognitive shadow. Like, we know that... Wait, no, you haven't read Mistborn.
No.
So I am not going to say what I was about to say.
As long as it's not like a major plot spoiler, I'm okay with learning about the overall systems.
It's a major plot spoiler.
Dang.
So
okay, fair enough.
I'll put it this way. We know that cognitive shadows, from what we've seen, are not able to access systems of investiture.
Oh, interesting.
From what we've seen, and that might be wrong, and if it is, I'll own up to that. But from what has been said in the books, cognitive shadows are not able to access systems of investiture unless they are themselves like a shard or something, because technically,
right,
that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
So I'm not sure if it would even be possible for the Blackthorn to access a surge, let alone multiple.
Even though he's
Simply
Retribution's
because-
favorite pet?
Even though he's Retribution's favorite pet, there's nothing tying him inherently to the physical realm, which is where surges are manifest.
Okay. Interesting. See, this is new information to me. Though, I would say all the better, because the Blackthorn, I think, is the best when he's doing Blackthorn things and not surges.
Right. Blackthorn gonna Blackthorn.
Exactly. Because I would love to see a book that uses the Blackthorn, like a later one, like as a enemy that you can't necessarily deal with, or you can only temporarily beat back. And because it's so crazy that Dalinar will probably become not only my favorite character in all written media, but also potentially my favorite antagonist in all written media. Or not protagonist, antagonist in all written media, depending on how much they develop. Because what we saw in Wind and Truth, he was very much just like shell of the Blackthorn, just like, I am the Blackthorn, and we don't know anything too much.
Almost a caricature, yeah.
Though I'll say he'll be a better antagonist than Moash.
Ayo.
I think Moash is a fine antagonist, but I don't know. It feels... He's done the most, like, awful antagonisty things, which is not a bad thing for an antagonist to do. But I can't like his character at all. Like, in comparison to... oh, crap. From Elantris. The red armor guy.
Oh, Hrathen?
Hrathen, yeah.
Yeah, one of the absolute best. Like, one of my favorite characters in the Cosmere, generally. Honestly, I love...
it's the parts of the book I like the most is Hrathen and his weird little crony who's just a little too good at his job. Which is as far as I've gotten, because I'm only like 4 hours in to the audiobook. And I'm sure that's going to develop into some interesting ways. But Hrathen's such an interesting character.
Elop?
Yeah.
Is his little guy?
Something like that. Some Brandonism name. I only know him by his voice in the audiobook. He's just very just you can imagine it hunched back and just like yes kind of character.
That's a fair approximation of Delof.
Yeah, to be fair, I have some minor dyslexia and I have a little bit of like ADD, so reading a book is difficult. So audiobook is the easiest way.
Audio they count.
So you know, I'm just saying that's my point of reference. Despite the fact that I read TTRPGs all the time, but that's at least one of my isms I can focus on a little bit better. But you know, I'm just God. I want to see Retribution's War so much. Like, I've only heard scraps of what happens in Mistborn because of, you know, just loose proximity to so many Cosmere heads, and I feel like it's going to be crazy.
If you haven't read Mistborn, you should read Mistborn.
I want to. I'm trying to do the Rafu though.
That's fair. And if you're starting the beginning with Elantris, that's fair. But especially when it comes to the wider goings-on of the Cosmere, Mistborn is getting increasingly relevant.
Yeah.
Like, by the time we get to, like, Isles of the Emberdark, I would argue more relevant than anywhere else. Especially with what we already have seen on the planet.
So... I wonder then, does that mean that Mistborn should be more towards like the end of the list since it's kind of like the culmination of a lot of things?
We'll see. I have to work on a new list. But no, I think Mistborn as a story is fundamental to understanding the Cosmere in general. I mean, the fact that in Mistborn you get a really easy to understand magic system that opens the door to understanding the wider Cosmere system of investiture generally. You get a pretty excellent explanation of or not necessarily an explanation, but at least exposure to an understanding of shards and how shards work. You get a basic explanation of how investiture can be mechanically used and changed.
Yeah.
Like the understanding that you get in Mistborn helps with so much else in understanding the Cosmere. We know that the Stormlight Archive is going to be Sanderson's sort of magnum opus, but I feel like Mistborn is going to be the Mistborn is going to hold your hand a lot more, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, because like before Stormlight really like took off, which wasn't until I think after the third book, because there was a lot more Mistborn stuff out in the wild before, you know, we got here towards the end of Stormlight. And even then, Stormlight, we just got the TTRPG first, and there really isn't really much else media on it so far. So I don't know. And it's so interesting because this is just a convergence of two different niches that have just hit at a point, and no one knows what's going to exactly happen after this convergence point. Because, let's talk about the fact that for the next handful of years, we're likely to get every year a new Sanderson approved and touched upon TTRPG going into depth about the settings to a level that we haven't seen before.
As canon as it possibly can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thrilled, honestly, especially when we get to the worlds where we only have like a single book. Like knowing more about the geopolitical landscape of Nalthis, where Warbreaker is going to be incredible. Like learning more about the different countries on Cell is going to be really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can't remember which planet is bigger, but like one of those two. I know the Nalthis we've only really explored like a tiny little part of what is a rather large and complex planet. And so when we get the Warbreaker setting, finding out what's going on in these minor obscure countries like Huth and Kuth, and just learning more about like the history of the Returned and the many war and all of these things is going to be so cool, because we don't get enough of that depth in the actual narrative because it's focusing on telling a story.
Right.
Where, getting the almost encyclopedic knowledge that I crave, at least, is going to be so fun.
Yeah, no, I'm so for world building. I'm so for a lot of like really well established systems. I've been that way forever. I think it really started off with like Naruto, the anime, because funny enough, it's a really well developed setting, at least up through Naruto Shippuden and not really into Boruto, because then they start getting aliens involved and infinite raising stakes and all that kind of stuff. But like the system was very grounded. What characters could do or couldn't do were very logical in the system that was developed, and the interpolitical way the groups interacted with made a lot of sense, all that kind of stuff. And I love that. And I actually made like a TTRPG back in the day about that, just, you know, early days, just playing with my friends, and we really liked it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because it felt very true to the source. And I gotta say, D&D has never really felt like it's had that much grounding to really like hold on to, considering that even for 5th edition, right, the newest, biggest edition, with so many campaign books, and yet most of them don't actually talk about Faerun all that much, or nothing beyond the Sword Coast, the one coast, you know? And it's like, it feels like such a shame, especially because there's so much media out there that, to be fair, is just inaccessible to people who play D&D 5e, because you have to read books that are like 30, 40 years old, and you have to play games that, you know, some of them are like dead MMOs, you know, that had lots of lore stuff in them and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, like, even Pathfinder's setting and everything is more fleshed out, I'll agree, but it still just feels like a big toy box to play with rather than like an actual setting to have a story and narrative in, and all kinds of like interesting, like, it doesn't feel very interconnected, I think, is the biggest thing. Where some people might argue, because they're going to point to this adventure path here, this, you know, whatever, and I'm going to be like, well, I guess I'm not as into it as you are, but I'll say I have the more general experience. So, you know, this game, though, our very first session, we were just nerding out about all the Stormin and Krem and Chowda and all the things, and talking about, you know, the Herdazian flint nails and the Thalen eyebrows, and, you know, like, it was something that we all just, after reading, just, most of them have only read like the first book and a little bit into the second book, and yet we were able to just enjoy ourselves in the setting more than I've ever done in most TTRPGs.
Yeah.
So despite the system not quite hitting all the marks I really wanted it to, the fact that we're going to be getting just essentially expansions every year, world hopping is going to be endlessly fascinating. And when we start learning more about the Ghost Bloods, because the Ghost Bloods are such a touchstone on pretty much every world about. So that's something that players, even who are not familiar with the games, can grab onto, because they're like, oh, the Ghost Bloods, I know those guys, I hate them. Or, you know, something along those lines. And it's like, it's so good. I wish they didn't try to go for a very accessible, easy to get into system, and they just let it be as nerdy as, because, like, let's be honest, right? The Cosmere heads are in this deep already. A deeper TTRPG is not going to be that big of a hurdle, let me tell you. So,
I mean, that's the real benefit of basing a TTRPG off of such a lore-rich property as the Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere in general, because anyone who is already into the Cosmere and starts playing the TTRPG, it's as if they've read 3,000 pages of world guide and lore and everything before jumping into this. So I feel like the amount of consistency in storytelling you're going to get going between like different groups playing the same system is going to be really, really high compared to like D&D, where everyone's making their own stuff up. There's like a core set of rules that everyone is roughly following, but in terms of storytelling and world, it's all going to be very different. And even with TTRPGs based on other properties, like I know there's a Star Wars TTRPG that's pretty popular, but even then, the amount of like lore that people are going to be familiar with is limited to a few movies and maybe some TV shows. But people that jump into Cosmere are going to have hundreds of hours of experience with the world already. And so jumping into that is going to make it a lot more, like, you can get into details that I don't think you would normally be able to get into in a role-playing game with that.
It creates a new level of immersion that you would not be able to get in other kinds of games. I gotta say, it's really fun when we're hopping into the war camps and I mention someone in green armor, or I mention the word Sadius, and everyone's just like, yes! Oh, Sadius! You know? Or I say Colin and Colin Blue, and everyone's just like, yeah! You know, it's so good. It's so, like, the last session, we just had this last week that kind of came up a few times already, and the week before, just, you know, just those moments that you just don't get in other games. You know, you talk about D&D and you mention someone like the Iron Fists, which are, you know, relatively well known in the setting, kind of mentioned in 5e a bit, but players don't have a strong opinion of it because, well, they haven't read a bunch of books about them. And, you know, and the thing is, right, I feel like the Cosmere RPG will age like a fine wine. It will only get better with every year that goes by because we'll just get more books and more interest. And I feel like it could be a good tinderbox to get a lot more people into the game when, you know, when in truth was coming out, there was a bunch of YouTubers who had suddenly come out and mentioned, I'm reading the Stormlight archive books. Like Jacksepticeye had done so like 6 months before and all that kind of stuff. A bunch of people were talking about it. And now just to think, what if that phenomena happens again where we get these big YouTubers talking about, oh yeah, my D&D group, we started playing Stormlight and I gotta say, it was really good. Or we started playing Mistborn and I gotta say, God, I wish guns were in D&D. And, you know, and we could have a bunch of people hop into a system that a lot of people are familiar with because mechanically speaking, it's very close. We got our advantages, we got our disadvantages, we got a D20, and we got some bonuses to stats based on skill ranks. And like, that's about as deep as the system goes that people recognize. But you know, like I feel like it's just potentially perfect if enough popular enough people talk about it. So it's fascinating. And like, to be fair, like for both of our channels, we're not like in the 100K range. We're not, you know, someone that a lot of people watch. To get offered this chance to like help kind of represent Stormlight is crazy. You know, even though like I don't think Stormlight is going to blow up and be a big phenomenon in the TTRPG space yet.
Not until we get a movie.
Yeah, something like that maybe, or a TV series or whatever. But like the connections we made and everything like that could become something wildly crazier in just a few years, given the opportunities that come out. Like, because I plan on talking about, you know, as much about the Cosmere as I can, in addition with my variety tabletop stuff that I generally talk about. And I'm sure you're not too interested in hopping out of the Cosmere art YouTube game yet.
Nah, I'm pretty bought in.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just like these opportunities will probably come back again. I mean, to be fair, we're on the Brotherwise channel as a live play that people get to see to play the game, you know. Heck, I know people are interested in the game because my live plays normally get like maybe, you know, over the course of a few months, like a few hundred views. And like in a week, the first episode of Stonewalkers was 1,000 views. And the second one is currently, and like live plays are not a super like hot commodity unless you're Critical Role or Dimension 20 or something. People are just not that hungry for nobody live plays. So 1,000 views is like worth 10,000 actual views for other types of content. Let's see, where is the live plays? This is no. Using it on my phone, which I gotta say, I like the YouTube stuff on the phone for the most part, but looking up your live videos is a nightmare. There it is. Yeah, 300 views. That was a few days ago, which that's really good overall speaking. And like, we're not, you know, super funny or super necessarily interesting people. We're just people playing the game, and that's still a good amount of eyes on the content. So like, it's interesting, and it's, I think, even more interesting that tabletop might be what sparks this kind of huge explosion of interest in Brandon Sanderson novels. Like, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on like the convergence of the two groups?
I mean, I do feel like Sanderson's fan base is very loyal anyway. I mean, the fact that he's gotten 2 out of the 5 highest funded Kickstarters ever are both Sanderson things. And like the amount of times that man has broken the internet just by announcing something it's getting unreasonable at this point. I feel like he's got a very loyal and very enthusiastic fan base. So the fact that there was such a turning out for the Cosmere RPG doesn't surprise me in the least.
Right.
I mean, I assume most of the people who backed the Cosmere RPG crowdfunding are people who are not regular tabletop players and just want to get some more Sanderson stuff. I mean, that's fairly well describes me. Like I backed at the top tier for like all of the GM things, and I hope to eventually play a session of the Cosmere RPG with some people in person. Like, that would be great. But the main reason why I backed was because, it's Sanders, it's deep lore and pretty rocks.
Yeah.
So I feel like just the fact that his audience is already so bought into anything he produces, that was a very natural springboard to the success of the TTRPG.
Yeah, which, by the way, I gotta check the Brotherwise channel, how other videos have been doing lately, because I'm sure it's been pretty decent, at least as far as TTRPGs are concerned. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to get crazy numbers unless you're Critical Role or D&D, but
as much as I want to be Matt Mercer, I am not Matt Mercer.
Me neither. As much as I think he and I are very similar in a lot of ways, just our overall styles. Like our Speak the Words, Foundry live play is at 8,100 views, which is really good for a live play. Like, most TTRPGs that are not D&D or I guess Pathfinder, because there is some kind of prominent content creators who work on Pathfinder stuff too, get like hundreds of views usually. Like Lancer's a really good example. Like Lancer's a really good, strong community, but their content, there's not a lot of Lancer content creators out there who make a lot of frequent content, and the live plays don't get that many views. So like compared to, I would say, like the B tier and lower groups, Cosmere is really doing really well. The only sad part is it's kind of just happening in the shadow of Daggerheart that has kind of just been taking the internet space by storm, because Daggerheart has just been like Critical Role essentially cannibalizing D&D, because D&D has been doing nothing.
D&D did dumb stuff,
and they just don't do anything with their game. They came out with a new edition that wasn't an edition, that barely changed anything, and like so much so that asking someone if something has changed from 14 to 2024 is a nightmare question, because they have to be like, did it really change? I have no idea. Let me go and look in the old book, I guess, and see if it's different than the new book. Like, and so Critical Role just came in and just like, hey, would you guys like a game from a company that actually cares about you and actually is going to make new content? I remember watching a D&D Direct, like, I think 2 years ago, which they have those. For anyone who doesn't know, they have D&D Directs. It was 90% like brand deals. Like, they had a Minecraft mod that they were advertising during it, and plushies from the movie that had come out, and like a Xanathar plushie. And then the very end part, they loosely talked about some books that were coming out. They didn't reveal anything that was like new or reveal any new classes or anything. They didn't do anything that like people who play the game want. They're like, hey, did you know that you can buy plushies at, Spencer's? And it's like, cool, thanks, I guess. D&D, tell me, why did you not release the the inventor one? The Artificer, yes. The Artificer in 2024, the only class to not get brought forward into 2024, which it will in the Eberron book, but they fucked that up somehow, and that's not coming out for a few more months. But so they released a new class for the first time in 10 years, and then they redid the game kind of, and then they didn't even copy their homework from the first one. So of course, Critical Role, who comes out and they're like, hey, here's our game. Also, by the way, did you know we're releasing even more content here soon? And everyone's just like, because now you can play like werewolves. They got new mechanics for transforming into creatures and stuff like that. Yeah, it just seems... And Critical Role poaching Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins from D&D to work on their game instead.
Mm-hmm.
Not as in high level positions, but still in pretty, relevant spots. It's just Critical Role is the alien that just burst out of the chest of D&D and is now, like effectively killed the old game and made their own game, which is better, and also not a D20 system, which thank God. I hate D20 systems. I hate when I make my really smart wizard make an arcane check with like a +7 or whatever, and I roll a 2, I get a 9, and then the barbarian rolls, gets a 14 with a -1 and gets a 13 and gets the check, and I don't. Right. And it's just like, what was I building
that shouldn't
for?
Work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm only a wizard because I cast spells, not because I'm a smart man who looks into magic or anything like that. Nah, I use the magic and he uses the axe. But effectively, just because of the dice roll, he can just know a thing about an arcane thing that I should know. Which, by the way, love Cosmere's expertise system, where you can actually just you have an expertise in a utility thing, and you just do it. You just know it. If you have an expertise in lock picking, you can just pick locks. Don't need to make a check. You just do it, which is good. I like that. I think characters should have things that they're good at and don't necessarily need to worry about failing a check for, because
something that's second nature. Yeah.
But it's just like, it would be really lame if in the book the master thief tries to get into a door and gets stuck at the very beginning of the mansion he's trying to go through because he's just like, man, I can't figure out this lock. It's just like, it's I could go on and on and on about a bunch of TTRPG stuff. I'm sorry, I've taken up most of our time just griping about TTRPGs. But the Cosmere, I think, is really good. I think there's so much potential, and it's just going to get funner and weirder as now Spren can go to other worlds. And we saw I heard, I didn't read it, but in Emberdark, a Windrunner had made an appearance doing Windrunner things.
Skybreaker, but Skybreaker. Close. Yeah.
Okay, well, shows how much I know, but still.
You'll get there.
Yeah, hopefully. Baby, it's so hard to focus. Also, I have like too many projects I'm working on at the same time, so. But like, what are your plans moving forward with all the stuff?
Great question. There's a lot of stuff. My plan at this point is mostly to sit down and make a plan.
All right.
I've sort of been taking it easy on content creation this year just because I assumed it would be lighter, and also I've just had a lot of other life stress that has taken a forefront. But I know there's content I want to make. There are videos that I want to dive into things with. And I should be able to.
To be fair, I have a baby. I didn't make videos for like the first 6 months of the year. And then it was just like, all right. Then I got suddenly messaged about joining this whole collab thing. And I was already planning on making videos on it. And then Paizo releases 2 new books. And honestly, as well, there's a lot of other tabletop stuff that's kind of been rumbling beneath the surface that people haven't heard about. I picked up a game at a store just the other day that came out last year that no one has made like really any videos on besides the person who made the game. And it's a pretty interesting one, honestly. It's called Cloudbreak Alliance. It's a very anime style game, but it's got some interesting kind of stuff in it. And like, that's the thing, right? I love tabletop. I talk about it all the time. I made a channel based on it. And there's this interesting game that I just didn't know about because how would I, right? You know,
Yeah.
unless I go to the store every day or every week to see these games as they drop, it's like, it's hard to know. And so, like, I totally get the whole life gets in the way. You know, I have a baby that I am the stay-at-home parent for, and you know, it's very hard to do things when now she's starting to crawl and get in trouble.
Oh
And
man.
yeah,
Once they're mobile, yeah, you have no hope.
she for hours on end will just beeline for the cat food endlessly. I I just like I build a barrier ever higher, and she just for like 30 minutes at a time she'll try her best to get over that barrier. I don't know what it is about the cat food, but you know, so it's like it's hard for me to read a book when I need to be vigilant at all times and like try to metabolize the information to then regurgitate for people on the internet with a filter, with the idea of people, you know, who are a bit more casual or a bit, you know, not as crazy about it as I am. It's a lot of work, so I totally get it. But what's like one piece of content you absolutely want to make that you're really interested in making?
Ooh. Okay. This is not a complete answer, but
Okay,
it's
I'll take what I can get.
it's a pivot. I really, really, really want to start a podcast.
Oh, okay.
That like I would, of course, use my YouTube channel and everything that I have established already as sort of a jumping off point. But I want to make a podcast that nobody steal this for. Are you familiar with the Harry Potter and the Sacred Text podcast? You heard of
No.
that at all? Okay. So that was a podcast started by a couple like Harvard divinity students approaching Harry Potter as if it were scripture.
Interesting.
Right? And yeah, like fascinating concept.
Mhm.
And they go chapter by chapter through the entire series of like, what do we learn about humanity and our relationship to deity and our relationship to each other through this chapter, through this specific like theological lens.
Right.
Really interesting podcast. I want to do the same thing, but with Stormlight, and not like approaching it as scripture necessarily, but approaching it as a like sort of a self-help text or a therapy book.
Interesting.
Like what do we learn about ourselves and our relationship to each other, and how can we improve ourselves and our habits and our like how do we get closer to the people that we want to be through the lessons and like examples from the Stormlight Archive. And that's the main, like that's my I really, 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 really want to do this content. Not a video, but
Fair. Content's content.
That's my, I've had that goal for a couple of years now, is I've just really wanted to make that podcast. And I've got like episodes outlined, and I have an entire season of what we would do every time. And I've been sort of passively looking for a co-host who is ideally someone in like the therapy field or something, where they could approach with that clinical knowledge, and it'd be really cool. And I think it'd be like really valuable to people as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's fascinating. I think that'd be really cool. Sorry, go ahead. I keep interrupting you.
Oh, I just keep on repeating myself and saying, yes, I agree. It would be really cool.
Yeah. That does sound, that's super interesting. See, that's funny because this Table Talk show was pretty much under a somewhat similar premise of maybe not like chapter by chapter or book game by game looking at like what we can do, but more just like tabletop has always been a thing of like a bunch of niche groups and their individual fandoms kind of subtly disagreeing with each other how tabletop should be played, because I can tell you Vampire the Masquerade players are not playing the same game that D&D players have ever played. They're very, very different. And I love tabletop from top to bottom as like a very... It's the only game / hobby where you get to make unique stories for yourself, for the characters you make, and to experience those kind of experiences. You get to, because whenever I would read a thing or watch a thing, I would always put myself like, what if I was in this universe? What my cool superhero character would do? And tabletop was exactly that. And it's such an experience that I feel like not enough people fully comprehend the depth of the experiences you can have in a session, like the real value. Because you always see these D&D channels talking about, yes, let's talk about how I broke the game this week with Infinite Wizards, or Meteor by dropping summoned animals on top of people for absurd amounts of damage and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, that seems so shallow and so not interesting for what tabletop is. I literally, as the GM, I mercilessly ended up killing a player's character in their sleep because of events that had happened, and it was devastating. And I wasn't trying to be so cold-blooded. It was just like, narratively, it had worked up to that in the moment. And I gave them tons of difficult chances to try to save them, and they were unable to, and he died. And we all just had a moment where we just had to like stop talking for a few minutes. And then after that, we had like a month off of the game because it was an emotional impact of just how sudden, and like, it was a really good character. It was a character that the GM, was very interested in their story because I had things planned out and everything. But like, in my narrative focused mind, this course of action was just something that needed to happen. And that's just not something you get playing video games. You don't have those moments where you have such a personal thing happen and you just have these moments, or you have a session that went and you get done and you're just like, oh my God, that was crazy. And you could feel accomplished for how you did things and what happened. And, and so like, I started Table Talk with the idea of just chatting about, what's going on in the tabletop field and just talking general tabletop philosophy. Cause that's the thing I can talk endlessly about. Like, why are games fun? What about them are fun? What elements can we look at, and like, what ways are people different? And like, my co-host was a lot more on the casual end and has a lot more of a casual / not casual, because I mean, he's in all my games and we play a lot. I don't think you can call him casual at this point, but definitely in the not as crazy as me department as far as things. And he's got like he's got a viewpoint that I feel is very common, general amongst people, like a very player position, where I'm coming at things from a very like, all right, I've studied this for years. Let's talk about this. And we've had some really interesting conversations about all kinds of things that you see in many tabletop games, like carry weight, which you would think is something that's very simple to talk about. You either love it or you hate it, but it's a lot more complicated thing than that, because carry weight is a mechanic that is just poorly utilized in a lot of ways, but can be utilized in very interesting ways depending on what kind of scenario. And not only that, but like general player psychology, like, because like for me, I get into the head of my players when I'm running the games, and I can guess where they're going to do and how they're going to do certain things, and it's very accurate, and we get there, but there's reasoning behind it. It's not just a me thing. There's an actual science behind it that like I utilize, and that's something that I think is fascinating that we don't see anyone talking about online, because I mean, you look up tabletop and you know what people are talking about, why this is good, why this is bad, how I made this broken build, or D&D horror stories, because that's just that's definitely a thing. So like, I'm so for a podcast that is just needlessly deep in the weeds in a subject that is so not the point of the series, but also an integral part of it. You know what I mean? Like the journeys that each of the characters go through in each of the Stormlight books specifically is, I think, way deeper of a narrative than like the actual narrative that's being told. You know, Shallan's story specifically is very complicated to say the least, and still complicated even after the 5th book. And Kaladin, I think, is such a great character to follow through for a lot of that kind of stuff. So like I could definitely get behind a podcast like that for sure.
It's in the works.
Yeah. No worries. You got my support at the very least.
Okay.
And I'm sure plenty of people as well. We're getting towards the end. I do want to ask one more question. What 2 questions, I lied. What mechanically, TTRPG wise, do you want to see expressed the most in Cosmere?
The easy answer is allomancy, because I love allomancy, and just being able to get crunchy with that magic system will be really fun. Like figuring out steel pushing and iron pulling, getting like anchor weights figured out, like the more fun thing though in terms of not crunch but role playing would be the other metals like rioting and soothing with zinc and brass will be really interesting. Just experiencing that role playing that of like I'm going to influence your emotions this way and rolling with that through the story I think will be really cool. So yeah, the mechanics of allomancy via tabletop will be really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree. From everything I've heard, I haven't even read the books, but from everything I've heard, plus I want to get the deck building game for Mistborn, because apparently that's also super fun. The Light Collar guys have played it and they really liked it. So
I've got it. I haven't played it yet, but I have it.
I want to play it so bad. I need to get it. But yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because like as much as I complain about Storm or Cosmere in general not having enough crunch to it that I would like, I'm a 50-50 guy. I want my game to be as close as possible to a 50-50 mix of crunch and narrative. I want them both to be pretty deep though. Like that's the thing, is like I want the game to be as mechanically sound as it is narratively satisfying. And like again, the Cosmere RPG does some things really well and is just it has a really good average across the field of as far as like all the modes of play that other games don't. But like if I compared it to like Pathfinder's combat is huge depth that is just not anywhere near touched by what Cosmere does. But Cosmere has at least more depth in fields like how the surges work as skills and having any kind of social system that actually feels mechanically interesting to deal with. So, you know, like I hope that Brotherwise takes an idea of, okay, we did Stormlight. That's the flagship. Now let's just take it a notch further with Mistborn and just go a little bit deeper, ease people into a more crunchy game, you know, while maintaining their design principles, but still, like, that's what I want, because it sounds like Allomancy is perfect for a crunchier game. And like that's the thing. I'm not as much of a combat guy. I mean, I'm equal combat as I am the other modes of play. I like a very balanced experience. So give me something like Zinc to do social combat with at a much deeper level. Let me be strategic with it. Let me like work on manipulating people and developing social networks and affecting politics, and make that a system you can mechanically interact with. Because if it's just dice checks, I'm going to cry. My other question is, what in TTRPG form in the Cosmere universe would you be the most interested in doing?
I think again, my easy answer is Scadriel. Like the scenario, the Era 2 is really, really cool to me.
Right.
It's magic and guns. Like,
right.
That's excellent combination. Era 2 to me is what Legend of Korra should have been to Avatar: Last Airbender. Like,
preach.
The evolution of the society and the world in conjunction with the magic system, and like it just is fascinating to me to see that, like the entire history of a world evolve very logically in association with the rules that were established in the first part. And so exploring, like being in Mistborn Era 2 and getting to combine some of these awesome things of this really great magic system plus the evolution of technology in this society would be really exciting. And that just as a player would be very compelling to me.
Like, what kind of stunts or what kind of like crazy thing would you like to do with that?
The being a twinborn in Mistborn Era 2, having an allomantic power and a ferrochemical power, and just finding out ways to leverage both of those would be great. I mean, I love what we see in Era 2 with Wax, where he's a coin shot, so he can do the awesome, exciting flying thing, but also manipulating his weight, which sounds like it would be excruciatingly boring, but he's able to use it in such interesting ways because of that specific combination of powers. And I feel like just having some sort of exploration of just what fun things can I do with these two separate powers that I can make interesting and exciting in a very unique way.
So would you like to do it more in like a sandbox kind of mode, or would you like to be like following a particular narrative?
I feel like I function better in narrative. Having guidance and objectives is going to be a lot more like that. That's going to enable me to do interesting things. I think of it kind of like a kite, where if you cut the string of a kite, the kite drops. If I have some sort of story to keep me grounded and engaged and give me specific guidelines to work within, doing cool things to accomplish those objectives within those guidelines is going to be a lot more interesting to me than just dropping me in Mistborn Era 2 and saying, all right, do some fun stuff, explore. That's not going to be as fun because there's not going to be a point to it. And so if there's a narrative that is going to be compelling, that is going to give me my point. And that will be a lot more interesting to me to explore within.
See, now that's interesting, right? Because because my brain, to be fair, as like a GM, forever GM, but mostly by choice because I enjoy the process of making interesting stories. That's what I really like to do. But I always crave the idea of like actually exploring a setting. Like actually, when I want to do a thing, there's the GM there to kind of help support looking into the things, developing the character in the way that I want to. And I always have a hard time feeling like why people would prefer anything other than that, because it's more like, because when you run like a module, right, for most games, your character's freedom is more or less attached to what the narrative is in a sense, right? Like you can't necessarily do anything you want because you have a plot line you have to work towards. And the way you express that, I think, is the best way I've heard it done so far, which is just, I want to be given a goal and I want to find fun and interesting ways to accomplish that goal that maybe wasn't planned for, or just the process of just accomplishing a thing without needing to like self actuate the actual like what I'm trying to do, you know? Like I think I get it now. I think the idea that people really like that guidance because it's something that it's just like people don't like building the towers out of blocks. They like knocking the tower down after the blocks have been set up, and maybe you do it succinctly, maybe you do it like as much or explosively as you want. Like I can see the enjoyment from that, and that's very interesting, and that's something that I'll consider moving forward, because I always try to get my players to have more like motivation to pursue their own kind of things. So if I give them those block towers to knock down, maybe that will provide better motivation in a sense of they'll do things more when they see that tower to knock down, you know.
I feel like it comes back to Sanderson's 3 laws of magic. I'm probably going to get the number wrong on this, but I believe it's law number 2, where he says that limitations are more interesting than powers. And so if there is something that is limiting or focusing me as a player to a specific objective, that's going to be more compelling than just being able to sandbox in a world.
Yeah, for sure. No, I get the perspective. I'm just someone who likes to explore. I like to mess around with things. I like to it's like playing Skyrim or playing like the Elder Scroll games. Like there is a narrative you can do, or you can just explore and find new and interesting things to do, or have your own. Like I played Starfield a little bit, and well, the story was okay. The number one thing I did mostly when I got the ability to, I just started building bases on planets and like harvesting different types of resources by base building on these, you know, infinite planets that you can go to essentially. And that was fun. It was fun for me to go to a planet, see what life forms were there, study it all, and be like, do I want to build a base here? And then making a base to get all the stuff out of it. That was interesting to me because, you know, it felt like it was a thing I was accomplishing to my own kind of end goals and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I totally get it. And this is why it's great to bring people on to chat about these kind of things. And like this conversation is very different than what we had with like Qualiers last week. Like last week was just, all right, let's talk lore. We talked about pretty much every planet. We talked about all the really interesting things. Those guys are great. They're very passionate about it. And this chat has been very fun of just like, all right, TTRPG time. Let's talk about what's interesting about these mechanics. Let's talk about how that affects the overall Cosmere verse, and like just the unbridled joy of getting new lore in a method that you can't get through reading the books normally. And like how that is just a different dimension that you normally don't get to interact with.
It's not just getting new lore, it's experiencing new lore. Like
yeah.
that it's exactly what you said earlier. Like that's the real beauty of tabletop RPGs, is that you don't just like consume a story, you experience the story, you create the story. And so the emotional payoffs are more real in that way because you are there doing the thing. Sure, you're following like a narrative with friends of doing like writing down silly numbers and rolling silly dice, but you're still telling a story together, and that's what is the powerful thing.
Yeah, and it's yours. No one can take it from you. You know, it would be nearly impossible to recreate the experience in the same way, and that's what makes it special. We're definitely at the end here. I'm definitely going to recommend, if you don't get a Stonewalkers game going too soon, check out Stonewalkers, because there's some stuff I know you're going to love towards the end chapters. I mean, we get a lot more of a look into the Iriali on Roshar through Stonewalkers, as well as, you know, some interesting stuff that happens with some of the heralds in that book, and just getting to see some other, you know, non-coalition and non-odium radiants that are out there, because there's plenty. And the implications that means for the lore, because it makes sense. It doesn't break the lore of the setting. The coalition is very much just everyone in proximity to Dalinar and that war going on, but there's a lot of stuff going on, like in Emul and Iriali and all those places, where there's definitely some Cosmere shenanigans going on that only can happen in a Cosmere game. That, oh, it's so good. And like you know, when life permits, definitely take a look at some of the interesting things they've added into the player handbook as well, because again, the Cremriel may not sound super fascinating, but it just very much hits in home that Fabriels are just imitation surges, and what that implies is the wider use of surges in more interesting and technical ways, other than just people who make oaths and, you know, have little flying companions. So typically flying companions, I don't know. I guess there are some Spren that don't fly, like the cultivation.
The Spren doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, Windle doesn't. In fact, I would say most don't.
Which is weird, because on the material plane, at the very least, they should be mostly immaterial.
So, like with pattern goes from surface to surface.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting. Again, one of the interesting things about having a game is now we get to ask these questions that we didn't really need to ask before, you know. But yeah, so any words you want to leave us off with before we end for today?
There is the Cosmere is going to keep on getting bigger, and with these RPGs expansions coming out, it will continue to expand, and so I would say there's always more to read and find out.
Nice.
Tagline.
Nice. And there's never a bad time to get into the game or into the books.
Oh yeah.
Because
it's always time for a reread, in fact.
You know, as far as Brandon's concerned, we're not even halfway done yet, so you know, there's a lot to come out. As for me, this week's been a little bit slow for video releases. I needed to take a break, and a video is coming out tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about the Necrologist from Battlecry. It's going to be really good. It's actually Necromancy in Pathfinder 2e, not the Necromancer class, which is it's very interesting. So check that video out tomorrow, and I'll be releasing. I will have a Starfinder video soon. It's just, it takes a lot more time because it's a full class review. And stay tuned, because there's just, Tabletop's doing some really cool things, and I've heard some interesting things from Gen Con, so it's going to be a wild time. But that's going to be it for us. Thank you all so much for watching, and I guess we'll go ahead and say goodnight.
Bye.
Good night.